Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Science Dispatch podcast. Very excited to be with you as always. My name is Cameron English, joined once again by the faithful, committed Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, it's so good to be with you again.
Nice to see you again. Spring is coming right along. Hopefully where you are, it's the same.
Yep, I am popping my allergy pills like they are opioids because otherwise I would be sneezing with a runny nose and a sore throat and I'd be whining all the time. It just wouldn't be good for anyone, especially my wife. So,
and a very lovely segue into the article you wanted to talk about. Nicely done. That's why you're the host.
Speaking of opioids, we've got a great story here by Dr. Jeffrey Singer, who is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute and a longtime contributor to ACSH. He also does a lot of co-authoring with our colleague Dr. Josh Bloom on the opioid epidemic, fentanyl epidemic, whatever you want to call it. They write a lot about drug policy, and this is a great article that Dr. Singer wrote. This originally appeared on the Cato Institute's website, and we reprinted it. But it's an interesting thesis that he's put out here, Chuck. Let me just read this introduction, and then you as the doctor can break down the details for us. So Jeff writes, after being essentially replaced by fentanyl during the darkest days of the COVID pandemic, heroin is reemerging as an option for consumers of black market drugs. Could this have something to do with the recent downturn in drug overdose fatalities? Oh, and as I forgot to mention, the article is called How Many Fewer Fentanyl-Related OD Deaths Are Due to the Resurgence of Heroin? Okay, Dr. Dinnerstein, what are your thoughts on this?
So it's interesting. I think he's discovered a new unheralded harm reduction method that the dealers are using more than anything else. So basically he begins by talking about the fact that opioid overdoses have decreased by about 24% over the last several years, and that among the overdoses that have diminished, there's a drop in fentanyl-related overdoses. When you really look at the numbers, it's a small drop, about 6% from 69% to 63%. So maybe a relatively a 10% decrease in the number, and that's been borne out by the general decrease in overdoses. And as we've talked about before, fentanyl is 100 times stronger than morphine, and so it has what we would describe in medicine as a smaller therapeutic window, meaning there's a smaller range between a dose where you say, yeah, man, I'm feeling okay, to you're feeling, oh shit, I'm dead. So
loving this therapy.
Well, that's to explain the therapeutic window. And heroin, which is much closer in potency to morphine, it's just a baser chemical form of morphine, has a much larger therapeutic window. You need to take more of it to kill yourself. And as a result, drug dealers who may be very sloppy in the way they compound things, if they're using more of the heroin and less of the fentanyl, then they're creating less lethal drugs to be available. Now, Jeffrey goes on to suggest that there may be several reasons for the decrease in this: the distribution of naloxone, increase in syringe services, increase availability to fentanyl testing strips that people can use. And so this is, as I suggested, a kind of a unheralded form of harm reduction, because now instead of using fentanyl, the illicit market may be making use of more heroin supplies. Now, it's unclear to me why that might be. Jeffrey seems to feel that it has to do with the adaptability of the black market, and that we've had better luck with law enforcement picking up illicit fentanyl importations in the country, though I think that that's probably more wishful thinking than anything else. So now whether there is some losses of precursor that they're no longer able to get a hold of, and they can get a hold of poppy so that they can make heroin, or whether they've lost some kind of technical ability to manufacture fentanyl. I think those are other things you have to think about. And again, if you're in the illicit drug business and you wish to bring drugs into the United States, fentanyl gets you a lot more bang for your buck because it just takes up a far less amount of space in terms of bringing it into the country.
So I'm wondering why the shift. He points to border closures and the pandemic basically restricting all sorts of traffic, including illicit drugs. And I sort of get the connection he's making, but at the same time, black market drug dealers are not really in the customer service business the way that Walmart or Amazon are. And so I'm wondering, like discovering that fentanyl is so much more potent and it's so much cheaper than heroin. Why would they switch back just because it's easier to move again? It seems like the profitable choice would be to go, well, let's just stick with this fentanyl stuff. Unless maybe they're just killing an inordinate amount of their customers.
Well, that's certainly, you got to have a customer base.
Right.
So, you don't want to knock off your customers. So that, I think that may be part of it. But again, I tend to think, if you want to talk about it in terms of market forces, I think you look at the supply side, and they may be having some problems with importing the precursors from China and India, because there's obviously there's political international pressure to cut down on those precursors getting out of the country. So that very well may explain why there's more availability of opium at this point in time. And then again, so I think that there are geopolitical forces that are at play. There's no war going on in Afghanistan, which is probably the largest site of illicit poppy growth, which will provide you with heroin. So that there's other ways of bringing the product into the country. And then there's also the thought, I think, and this is all conjecture, that the bad actors have been able to get a hold of opium and use that to generate income for their other activities, and they're not able to get a hold of precursor the same way the cartels might be.
That's interesting. I remember reading, this was years ago, but it was a foreign policy analyst, I think at Cato as well, in like 2004, who pointed out that the heroin trade really exploded after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan because they destroyed so much of the agricultural base of the country. The farmers were looking around, they're like, well, we can't grow these crops anymore because our soil is, there's craters in it. So, but what they realized is we could cheaply grow poppies, relatively cheaply. And so they all turned to growing poppies, opium poppies, for the heroin market as a way, So in other words, I think that sort of lends credibility to what you're saying, is that it just seems like the more viable option.
And the same holds true, if you want to deal with a purely capitalistic market forces analysis for cocaine. These cocaine and opium are relatively easily grown, and they are cash crops. And if you need to supplement your income, these are ways to do it. Not all farmers have the USDA and crop guarantees.
Some people drive Uber, other people got to pay your bills somehow. But, well, in other words, I guess it's an interesting example of all of the forces that affect the drug market, and I guess really affect any market. But sometimes there's just things out of your control, and maybe it's not that the needle exchange programs have just started working much better. It's
right.
You know,
And then what we would really hope for is that the demand side would be decreased because there would be people that are less unhappy with their lives or circumstances, that this is not the pathway that they choose.
yes, indeed. Well, maybe the problem with that is once people start using, it becomes increasingly difficult to stop because it feels so awesome. So I'm told.
Oh, but it's an addictive substance. So yes.
Yeah.
So
Although I don't know, like, has alcohol consumption come down since the height of the COVID restrictions? Maybe that would be a good proxy for testing this.
I don't know.
Okay. I have to look into it. Anyways, I mean, well, all things considered, I guess this is probably good, right? Well, it is absolutely good. I mean, there's fewer people dying of overdose.
Right.
And the numbers are shocking. I think it's easy to overlook. I mean, you're talking about a football stadium worth of people every year just overdosing, which is tragic, and I know a lot of people are impacted by that, but we tend to focus on wars and, whatever things attract our attention at any given moment. And then this sort of gets overlooked unless we're, watching a Netflix show about why the Sacklers are bastards. You know what I mean?
I hear you. So here's maybe another way to think about it. If you simply say the number of overdose deaths and overdoses has decreased, and that's good, you can break it out a little bit more and decide whether there are less of them because of prevention, meaning people didn't start. Is that a better good than the methods that we've really been pushing, which are maintenance methods with the naloxone and the strips and the clean syringes are all for people that are already using, and now we're going to reduce harm by making that lifestyle safer. Is that a lesser good than having not started the lifestyle at all? You probably could argue yes, that it's true, but either way those numbers come down.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt which is better in my mind as a church-going dad of two young children. Let's keep people off of the addictive opioids, just for funsies. Like if you break your elbow and you need some, then by all means, let's give people that. But, I think I'm with Sally Satel on this point, that if you can stop people from developing a drug career and hey, let's take up yoga and so like stamp collecting, right? Let's stay away from.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is that when you look at the numbers coming down, we've probably made a lot of inroads in the low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
Of reducing the harm to the people that are addicted.
Mm-hmm.
But we may not have made as much progress in preventing people from choosing that lifestyle to begin with, because that's a harder lift.
Yeah, I agree. But both are good. Both are good. I'm just saying, if you gave me, like, the way you presented it was, do you want this piece of fruit or this one? I want the bigger one that's sweeter than...
We'll take them both. Obviously, we'll take them both.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you don't want people to die, right? People dying on your streets doesn't help anybody. I think there's some morbid folks out there who are like, good drug addict. But
well, it's right from the tobacco playbook when you say that, because they, their argument was that, those people smoking cigarettes would die sooner, and so they weren't going to cost us as much.
Yeah, well,
of course, we've come up with better ways to keep them alive, so they cost more now. So it's a different problem.
Well, the more cynical side of me says that's why you don't want safer options developed. If all the smokers die, then you solve the problem. I don't know. Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
We won't go down that. But I think it does get back into prevention maintenance conversation.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So as we wrap up here, what would confirm Dr. Singer's thesis here? Do we just need a few more years of data to see how the trends go, or what would prove or disprove this in your mind?
I think that we're going to need some more data over the next year or two to see whether how that mix of drug overdoses changes, because there are other drugs in the illicit pipeline that are far stronger than fentanyl. Therefore, they take up less room and will be coming to our shores and to a dealer near you.
Well, you're talking about carfentanil and the even stronger stuff that they use.
All those.
Okay. All the analogs that they can knock out a moose, all that stuff.
Yes. I mean, it's.
And I thought that was here already. Did it disappear? Because
yeah, it's here. It's just when it very well may be that it probably takes more work to make sufentanil carfentanil than fentanyl. So you go with what you got. This is what you got, a production lab in Mexico or wherever it is turning it out. Why rock the boat? But other people will be bringing it in.
Very good. Okay, well, once again, Dr. Singer's article is called "How Many Fewer Fentanyl-Related OD Deaths Are Due to a Resurgence of Heroin." That is on our website, acsh.org. If you go to the website, click the subscribe tab, give us your email. We'll send you these articles. You get them in your inbox. The ones you read are the ones we talk about, and you can show up a little more informed for the podcast. So thank you as always. You can follow us on social media. It's at ACSH.org. I'm at CamJEnglish. Send emails to the organization. We'll get them to Chuck, and he will respond as long as you are not a jerk. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Take care.